Singer-songwriter Joan Osborne released this in March 1995. It topped the charts all over the world. Eric Bazilian, who wrote the song, said the song was about experiencing something that totally changes your worldview. According to him, that experience could range from an encounter with an alien, New Mexico, or an encounter with God, or an encounter with a near-death experience. The lyrics of One of Us ask us how we would relate to God if he or she was just an ordinary person, a slob like one of us. What would God's name be if she or he had one? I believe, according to the Hebrew Older Testament, there's 73 names for God. What would God's face look like if he or she had a face? Would you want to see God's face if it meant that you had to believe certain things about God and about religion or about church or prophets or books? So what if God were one of us? Maybe God is actually driving the bus in the person of Jesus. Public transportation, one of the many faces that we ignore on public transportation, simply everybody trying to make their way to whatever they call home. What is home? Merriam-Webster says this: home, a place where one lives, an environment affording security and happiness, a valued place considered a refuge or a place of origin. So here are homes in Ethiopia. Here's a temporary migrant home for the caravan from Central America at the Benito Juarez Sports Center in Tijuana. Here are homes in Haiti. Here's a homeless encampment in the incredibly liberal and progressive city of Minneapolis along the interstate where there should be no homeless because all those liberals should take care of their homeless folks. Right? And a typical homeless encampment on the streets of Phoenix. And finally, a typical Phoenix middle to upper class home backing up one of our beautiful mountains. Wow. What is home sweet home for you? I've had a lot of homes in my lifetime: Boonville, Mississippi, Chicago South Side, St. Louis, Wayne, Lincoln, Nebraska, Port-au-Prince, Haiti for summers, Tijuana, Mexico, Novosibirsk, Russia, Stevens Point, Milwaukee, Madison, Wisconsin, Minneapolis, and finally Phoenix. Which was really home? In all those places, with the exception of Chicago, Port-au-Prince, and Haiti, I had a traditional home. A roof, I had clean water, I had electricity, I had heat, I had cooling, I had a bedroom, I had a bathroom, I had kitchen. As a youth, for about 8 months, I was homeless in Chicago and lived in some of those lean-tos, but generally would couch hop, or friend hop, or stranger hop. That was home sweet home, honestly, if I could have a couch for the night. In Mexico for 3 summers, I stayed at an orphanage that had no running water, no flush toilets. Home sweet home. In Haiti, I was in a mission complex, bunking with hundreds of other people. No facilities, but outhouses. Home sweet home. I am not sure I ever feel at home. Growing up in Mississippi at an early age, I knew I was different. I knew I was light in my loafers. My childhood home in Boonville, Mississippi, now sits in the back of Pennington Acres Trailer Court. Nobody lives in the family home. But it never felt like home because I was never fully accepted in that home, especially by my father, who was the owner of the home and made it very clear he owned that home and he gave us that home. And that home never felt safe because my father was a rager and I had a complicit mother and I had a wild child for a sister. For the most part, moving to Chicago's South Side with my kin, with my Auntie Ann, Auntie Annabelle, and Uncle Clarence, whose picture is here, and cousins Marcus and Hope. Living with them for 11 years, from 11 to 13, that really felt like my 2 years of home. I was there because I felt loved, I felt accepted, I felt embraced, I felt seen for who I was. Now, there is a strange understanding in the reading that was read for us this morning in beautiful Spanish, in that beautiful, colorful dress, which wowed us all. And Carson, your very firm and solid reading of that story and sharing of the quote. It's about heavenly home, whatever that means to all of us. Billy Graham said, "My home is in heaven, I'm just traveling through this world." It's a narrative that a lot of Christians hold, that God has a mansion in the sky, there are streets of gold and gates of gold, and we all get a room in God's mansion eventually. And often with that understanding, this life, this earth, is just kind of a stopping point. And life is all about getting to that next place and not really living fully here. It's to find peace and rest up there or out there in God's mansion, because this world is evil and this world is just waiting to be destroyed by God's fiery judgment. That's one paradigm and narrative of the story. Humanity, I think, is honestly doing a pretty good job of destroying our world with climate change. I don't think we have to wait on God. But I really like the Message version of this particular reading that was read for us, and I'd like you to hear it in that version. And I'd like you to read it along with me on the screen. John 14, 1 through 3. Let's read together. "Don't let your hearts be troubled. There is plenty of room for you in my parents' home. If that weren't so, would I have told you that I'm on my way to get a room ready for you? And if I'm on my way to get your room ready, I'll come back and get you so you can live where I live." Those are some of the interesting words of Jesus before the resurrection, but apply after the resurrection. Jesus notes that we have troubled hearts. On any given Sunday, our pews are full of people with troubled hearts. Do you not have a troubled heart? We know that mortal life doesn't last. We know that this body, it may be the home for our soul and our spirit and our mind and our emotions and our true selves, but we know that it's only got a good 70 to 100 years. And some of us have troubled hearts because, well, we don't really feel we've ever found a place we can call home. Maybe some of you, like me, you have a restless spirit. We're just like strangers on the bus trying to make our way home. And our world, it seems right now, is something that could cause us troubled hearts. What would free our hearts from being troubled? The world has a multitude of answers. Drugs, alcohol, opioids, gadgets, luxury cars, and all of these luxury apartments being built around us. The job that finally brings you fulfillment, or on Match.com, maybe you happen to meet Taylor or someone else. Martin Luther, the reformer, says, what do you hang your heart on? He says that whatever we hang our hearts on is our God. The heart that is troubled is a heart that is not hung on God, but rather hung on things that the world peddles to soothe our troubled hearts. Is that not true? Jesus tells us in this reading, hang your hearts filled with deep uncertainty and existential angst. Hang your hearts on God. Hang your hearts on me, because God has a place for you. In this story, the followers of Jesus, they see things are beginning to fall apart with their Messiah. You see, they had hung their hearts on Jesus, and things were not going very well with this Jesus, because Jesus was predicting his own death and his demise, and he was predicting that all the disciples would abandon him, and especially Peter, who would deny him 3 times. It didn't sound like things were going to end well, and Jesus was preparing his disciples for a pretty nasty ending. But he was assuring them with these words that there is something more. Yeah, there's an afterlife, but there's something more in this life. And he says, there's some work that needs to be done, and it's not all about the next life, because you got a life right now. It's the strange balance between life that is amazing and beautiful and wonderful and life that is incredibly hard and challenging. And for some, life can be so hard that they just want to be done with life. For others, life is like one big box of chocolates. Thank you, Forrest Gump. Jesus says life may be hard and you may have troubled hearts, but hold on, hang on. I have a place for you in my home where you will be nurtured and loved and protected and coddled and taken good care of. But the challenge is not to get so heavenly minded that we aren't of any earthly good. I think that's what Jesus is mixing in with these statements. Oliver Wendell Holmes, by the way, was the first to make that statement. The thinking goes that people who look forward to spending eternity in peaceful joy with God in heaven are too willing sometimes to accept the unacceptable conditions which exist on earth, and they are just ready to get out of here. I recently read a book by Ram Dass that was entitled Walking Each Other Home. It's conversations on living and dying. And he observes, we're all just walking each other home. I heard that a few weeks ago. I picked up the book and I started reading the book. And Ram Dass says in this book, let what is take you closer to God. Let what is take you closer to God. Because we're all just walking each other home. I think that's what the disciples were being told by Jesus. Let what is coming, what is happening, what is here and now, move you closer to God so we can walk each other home. I've been asking myself, after the reading of this book, what if people I encounter in daily life are all in their own way walking me home? What if each of you is walking me home? What if I am walking you home? And what if we are walking each other to what we call home? I am probably often very unaware of how people impact my life and how they're helping to walk me home. What if they're helping me find out what it means to find home or to be whole and to be complete? I had one of those moments in Sedona I'd like to end my message with today. I got to Sedona at 11:30 p.m. on Wednesday. Reverend Donna is gracious enough to let me use her home whenever it's needed because she's in New Mexico looking for UFOs. And so I was going to hike, and I was going to read, and I was going to prepare for the message series that Susan and I are doing on home. And of course, this is Jackson outside Donna's home, looking pensive, like, aren't you going to take me for a hike or a walk? So Thursday morning, bright and early, I went to the car wash, but I got so frustrated at the car wash because it took an hour to wash my car and there was nobody in line. The reason was they said you have an extra hairy interior and we need to do a lot of extra vacuuming. Thank you, Jackson. So I said, come on, I'm here in Sedona, I'm stuck at this car wash. So many trails to hike. So many books to read, so much stuff to plan. After being delayed at the car wash, I then head toward Indian Gardens Cafe in Oak Creek Canyon, just north of Sedona. And wouldn't you know it, there was an accident that held me up for another hour. Finally, impatient I got to Indian Gardens Cafe. And there's such a powerful energy, if you have ever been there, in their back garden. And there was only one table left in the back garden because now it's about 11:30 in the morning. So I leashed Jackson to that table, left my book there, a clear sign, right? The table was taken, nobody else should get it. And nobody else sit down. This is the book I was reading. No light reading for me. Racial Domination, Racial Progress. So I went in and I ordered. The line was huge. I was the 10th person back. I go back out, and wouldn't you know it, somebody is sitting at my table. He was dressed very Sedona-like, and he said, "Is it okay to share with you?" I unwillingly said with a smile, "Yes, of course." So I sat down, I picked up my book, I began to read, I began to drink my coffee, waiting for the food. The strange thing is, we both ordered the exact same thing, breakfast for lunch. Quinoa, kale, egg, avocado breakfast bowl. Is anybody getting hungry? No. It is a delightful dish. Well, finally, I break the ice. This is a great dish, isn't it? After all, we both ordered it. I've been attempting to get the owners to open one of these cafes in Phoenix. He had a German accent. We introduced ourselves, and from that point on, we began the journey of walking each other home for 2 hours. His name is Eric. We talked about how neither of us have a sense of home. He grew up in Berlin, I grew up in Mississippi and Chicago, and we've been wanderers ever since. We don't feel we have home with family. We don't feel we have any real roots. He's coming back to Sedona to see if that might be home, because he lived there for 2 months at one point and was just moving back from San Francisco. It never felt like home. We talked about being in the moment. We talked about having restless hearts, and he was helping me write my sermon, actually. We talked about his awarenesses when he was in Berlin, where he was born, the very first time he was in a concentration camp just a couple of years ago. And by the way, his last name is Braun, and he found out he had connections to Eva Braun. I talked about my return to Mississippi to follow the civil rights movement trail, realizing I had deep roots in a family based in white supremacy. And we experienced the healing that he found in the concentration camp, and I told him about the healing I found on the civil rights trail. We shared deeply, and we both realized this was a sacred moment, a moment that probably will never be repeated again. And to think I almost missed it, or maybe I was delayed for, 2 hours because I wasn't supposed to miss this. And it's carried me through to this day, even carried me through the fact that none of our system was working in the back when I got here this morning. I felt like Eric and I walked each other a bit closer to home, to God, to the sacred during that conversation. And then Eric shared this quote by Pico Iyer: "Home is not just the place where you happen to be born, it's the place where you become yourself." Wasn't that, and is that not profound? And then I shared a pithy quote or two with him, of course, because we're both smart kind of guys. And we have pithy quotes memorized. And then I shared with him the theme of this message. We are just walking each other home, and we both said yes, and we decided we would reframe it. And this is Eric. We are just walking each other to home within, to the light of the divine. And then, you're going to appreciate this, Arnie and Shirley, as world travelers. He shared a couple of light images from Egypt. And these are the images. And the next image. And I thought, how profound to have an opportunity to walk each other toward the light. And is that not what life is really about? It's moving toward, engaging with the light of God, the light of others, the divine light. Ram Dass and Eric and James were all referring to that spiritual journey. The walk each one of us makes through that eventually leads back to the source. In God's house, there's a place for me. I am God's child. Yes, I am. We always have a home with God, for Jesus tells us that. Jesus tells us the kingdom of God is within. So I say, let's walk each other home. Let's be intentional as we walk each other home. As we walk each other home to God, as we walk each other home to the source of breath and life, for our source is God. God is our home. And here in this place, we're making another home for ourselves, a spiritual home, where we get to journey with each other and check in with each other on Sundays and during the week. So I ask you this morning, are you looking for a home? I've been looking for a home. I hope my home in Phoenix feels like home. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. Sometimes this faith community feels like home and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes my body feels like home and sometimes it doesn't. But where do you hang your heart? Are you connected to the source? Are you intentionally connecting to the source? And do you know that you have the kingdom of God within you? That is profound. God always has a home for you because God's home is in you. You know, we all spend so much time living in this outer world, then we encounter things that force us into our inner world. The inner world is what I consider to be home. And last but not least, we are all in this together. We are parallel souls on a parallel journey of finding meaning and eventually releasing meaning in order to surrender to the one, capital O. We are walking each other home. So as you think about home over the next few weeks, as we talk about the stuff in your home and we talk about finding home within and finding home without and what it means to be in home, I'd like you to connect with this Urban Dictionary version of home, which I think is incredibly much more accurate than even Webster's or Merriam. That person against whom you can rest your head and your heart and everything feels safe. The place where you are not alone. I know I'm home when I can be me and still feel loved. For me, that's God. And that's others in my life that I'm in relationship with. But primarily, that's God, who always offers us and gives us home. That place where we can rest our heads, rest our hearts, where we feel safe and nurtured and loved, and we know we are not alone on the journey. But God is walking with us. God is walking us to home.